My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GloCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I'm here today to help you build your cloud architect career. Maybe you have a goal of becoming an AWS Solutions Architect or an Azure Solutions Architect or a cloud architect. Bring me your questions so I can assist you build your technology career. I remember 25 years ago, a little over 25 years ago, I was in an internal medicine career. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I wanted to move to tech. And I so didn't know where to go and how to get there. And I spent a lot of effort in all the wrong directions. And then poof, I got some great advice. I was hired shortly after, and I've had the career of, I can't even imagine. It's been wonderful. And I've loved every day of it and every minute of it. And that's why I'm here to help answer any questions you actually have. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's why I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Tonight, we have a How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar. If you're curious, you can join me in this free Cloud Architect webinar. We will go over what we do as a cloud architect. We will talk about the skills you need as a cloud architect. We will talk about every step to go from where you are to become a cloud architect. And it doesn't matter your background. We'll talk about everything you need to do in order to get there. So I kind of hope that actually helps of what we're actually doing tonight. Now, I'd also like to let you know that we've got free guides in the description of this video. Free guides in how to win the architect interview, for example, free guides on how to be a cloud architect or an AI architect or an enterprise architect, guides like that. Please sign up for some. They're completely free. They'll be emailed to you, and they are in the guide. I'd also like to tell you that realistically speaking, and it looks like we have a video issue going on here right now. Let me bear with me. Let me just restart this and we'll be good to go. Sorry about that, everyone. Apparently the Blackmagic driver that enables my camera to go through this computer crashed, and I just needed to restart it. So I am back, and apologies for that. Tech issues just exist, and that's why we architects spend a lot of time trying to design them for resiliency. But this is a SaaS platform, so we have no control over it. But thanks so much. The last thing I wanted to say is that we have our summer savings going on now, which is 50% off. That is going to end at the end of this month. So if you're interested in any of our training and it's 50% off, take advantage of it now. Now that we've got our tech issues out of the way, do we have any questions from the audience on, And if you've got any questions, please bring them to me. Just drop them in the chat box and we'll do anything we can to actually answer them for you. Common question. What's the difference between a cloud engineer and a cloud architect? That's a great question. That's a question we get asked constantly. And let's address that question first. A cloud architect and a cloud engineer are both people that do things with cloud computing, but our jobs are completely different. The cloud architect is actually a strategist, and the cloud engineer is a deep technology professional. Let me map out what we actually do as cloud architects. I'll show you what we do, and then I'll tell you that what we do is skills. And then I'll actually go to the cloud engineer world, and then I'll show you what they do, and then I'll actually tell you the skills they need, and I'll draw some diagrams along the way. Let's have fun with this question. So the difference between a cloud architect and a cloud engineer is what we do. We cloud architects are strategists, and here's kind of the role of what we typically do in our job. As a cloud architect, the first thing we typically do is meet with an executive sponsor, the project sponsor, and we have to determine what they're trying to achieve. What is it? Are they trying to increase revenue, for example, through their website by making a change to their e-commerce platform? So we have to figure out what we're trying to do, the key success factors, determine what's in scope, what's out of scope, what's part of the architectures, and what the business actually needs. Now, because anytime we want to change a company and enhance their performance as an architect, we're going to have to meet with a large number of stakeholders. So we're going to have to identify the stakeholders in the beginning. We're going to have to meet with the stakeholders, identify their needs, identify what their side of the business needs, and how we can make them successful. We typically, at that point, will have to know what we're doing, know the future business processes, what have you, and then we're going to design the technology architecture. Now, that means we'll look at the data architecture, we'll look at the application architecture, the technology architecture. Technology could be the network, the security, the compute, and any other robotics and AI we could be using as well. And then we go from the actual architecture. For example, we need 10,000 servers, to the solutions architecture, which is, okay, instead of 10,000 servers that we bought from Dell, we'll rent 5,000 of them from AWS, and their servers are called EC2 instances, and we'll get the rest of the 5,000 virtual machines from the Azure cloud, and they're called Azure virtual machines, that kind of thing. So the solutions architecture is when we take the technology architectures and find our vendors. And then typically we plan the migration. So how many steps do we need? What are the phases of the migration? What is the skill level of the people? What kind of training is necessary to train the people? And then we even create a governance plan, a change management plan. We create architectural review boards. So that's what we do as an architect. So if you look at what we do as an architect, you're going to need a certain set of skills. Let me kind of show you what they are. The majority of our job is non-technical. About 75% of the job is non-technical. And we're meeting with stakeholders. We're designing to enhance business performance. We have to be able to sell the solution to the C-suite and the board. So that brings us into the world of needing a lot of business knowledge and CXO relevance and the ability to manage stakeholders. Now, people come to architects to create a strategy or a plan for them to enhance their business. And whether that means AI making future predictions for them, whether it enables better communication and collaboration across continents and employees or what have you, there's a strategy behind what we're trying to do to help the business. Our job involves a lot of negotiation, a lot of organizational change management, changing the cultures and things that are associated with it, a lot of executive writing, a lot of sales, because we have to be able to convince the board and the C-suite to adopt the architecture or it goes nowhere. Constant executive communication, presentations to the board, presentations constantly, getting information and asking the right question, and of course, influencing the organization. And as the architect, we don't touch the technology. So we're going to be leading a team of people to help us with our networking strategy, our application strategy, our load balancing strategy, our compute strategy, our AI strategy, our IAM strategy, data strategy, what have you. So we're going to be facilitating these. Now, that's the actual cloud architect. Now, let's show the difference between the engineer. Now, the cloud engineer is completely different. We'll title this one cloud engineer. So what does the cloud engineer which is different? And it's a completely different set of skills, which is typically why if someone works as an engineer, like a cloud engineer for 10 years, they typically need the same amount of training to become a cloud architect as a sales rep, because the skills are so different. So what the cloud engineer does is they build. They build the things that we architects actually design. So just like in building where the architect is the system designer and then you've got a construction crew, that construction crew is the cloud engineers and the DevOps engineers. So the cloud engineers are building the system. Now, what they're also going to do, the cloud engineers, is to a degree, they're going to tune the system. Make changes to the system. So that's what you're doing, is that's what the engineers are doing. So if we look at what the engineers are doing, they're going to have a very different skill set. So if we go back to the architect, and you notice that the architect's predominant skills are non-technical: business, strategy, negotiation, communications. Architects don't touch the technology. Now, when we go to the engineer is going to build it. So what are they going to build? Well, they're going to be working with operating systems, right? Because they're going to build servers, and that means they're going to have to know Linux and Windows. Have to, because we'll be dealing with both kinds of servers as a cloud engineer. Now, the cloud architect doesn't touch the technology, so that's not part of our world. Now, the cloud engineer also is going to be having to deal with the cloud provider stuff. So let's just say so that means they're also going to need to know compute and storage, but how to. So they're going to have to know how to implement on the cloud providers. Now that means knowing the command lines, the consoles, infrastructure as code, what have you. Now the cloud engineer, again, not the cloud architect, this is not our job, but the cloud engineer is going to be dealing with infrastructure as code, things like Terraform. Again, these are not cloud architect skills. Now the cloud engineer is going to have to automate somehow along the way, right? Because their job is going to be really busy. And that means the cloud engineer, not the architect, will need how to code. A cloud architect doesn't know how to code, doesn't need to know how to code, and most don't. But if we deal with the engineer, they're going to have to know Python. They're going to have to know, for example, Bash shell scripting. They're going to typically have to know some Windows PowerShell scripting. So I want you to see that. So this is the cloud engineers. How do I build this stuff? And it's not just the how-to that I want in a cloud engineer. It's the why. Why did you update the kernel or want to update the kernel in this Linux operating system? If you make this change, what's the impact of this change to another thing? So that's the cloud engineer, a deep, deep, deep technical professional. And notice these are hands-on skills. And if we go back to the cloud architect, notice the majority of skills are non-technical. We're going to the business. We're not touching the technology ever. We're leading a technology team to help us design these things, but we still need to know these things. But we're meeting with clients. We're influencing clients. We're negotiating. It's a very, very different job. So I'm glad we got to ask that question a lot of the time, because that's the problem. One of the biggest challenges, people want to be cloud architects and they learn all those cloud engineering things. And they go on an interview, and as soon as they make it on the interview, and they could have been a cloud engineer for 15 years, it doesn't matter. They go on the interview and someone expects a business executive, they get a technical person, and they fail the interview. So that's one of the biggest reasons people actually fail the cloud architect interview, is they have the wrong skills. They actually have cloud engineering skills. So whoever asked that question, we get asked that question a lot. I'm glad you asked that question, because it'll tell you exactly how to prepare for your future. Great question. Adam123. Hi, Mike. What certification is best? AWS, Azure, Google for an architect? So Adam123, there's a couple of things that I want you to understand. There are no actual architecture certifications except for the CCDE, where they actually teach you anything about architecture. The AWS Solutions Architect Professional is the name of a whole bunch of AWS services, marketing terms, and how to configure that. But we architects can't use those marketing terms with our clients because we need to look like trusted advisors. So we talk about virtual machines, not EC2 instances. We talk about block storage, not elastic block storage, because we actually have to communicate in a common language with our clients. And they teach you how to implement stuff. So in none of these, there's that. Now, TOGAF itself, I love the TOGAF framework. I've used it forever. Guess what? Here's the TOGAF framework. It's a set of stages. But even if you take the TOGAF 10 certification, they'll never teach you what to do in any of the stages. So It's just certification. So the certification path that's best for the architect is to become an architect. And I'll tell you my process. My process is a little different. I have a 5-step process. And here's how little certifications actually matter in the process. And I'll show you what I do and why I do it. This is my view. This is the way medical professionals are trained. And this is the way I train students forever. And that's why my clients are companies like Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, security companies like Palo Alto, or Zscaler, Netspoke, those kinds of companies, the people I trained work there. And here's why. For me, the first thing that I do whenever it comes to training for any career is I say you focus on being great. So if you want to be a physician, you have to learn how to be a physician before you take your medical boards. It's a legal requirement. You want to be an architect, become an architect, and then do your certifications in branding. But you have to know how to be a doctor before you can do surgery. And I don't care whether you pass your boards or not. I care whether you have the skills. So for me, phase 1 is making sure you're great at your job. Now, that's important. Now, the next thing is making sure you're what the hiring manager wants. Depending upon which survey you actually look at, 80 to 90, 89% plus people fail the interview because they're not what the hiring manager wants. So for me, develop the skills and then be exactly what the hiring manager was looking for. Why? When you are what they're looking for, they hire you and you're worth more and you earn more when you are what someone's looking for. Now, after you can do the job and after you're what the hiring manager wants, then you need to build a real world portfolio to show the world you're actually doing the job and you can. Now, that portfolio has to be right. If it's the wrong portfolio, it'll show you don't know what the job is if it's the right portfolio. Then, after you can do the job, you're what the hiring manager wants, and you've got a portfolio, that's when we talk about other stuff. Now, realize that phase 3, you are hireable because you have all the skills, you're what the manager wants, and you can prove to the world you can do it. So the next phase becomes credentials and branding. So for example, if I was training a cloud architect, I would pick any one of the 3 cloud providers' certifications for the solutions architect, which has no solutions architecture. And why would I pick it? Most management doesn't know there's 0 solutions architecture in the Azure Solutions Architect Professional. Most people don't know there's 0 solutions architecture in the Google Professional Cloud Architect. They don't realize it's a systems admin certification, not an architecture certification. So go get one of them, only one of them. And why are you doing it? It's to enhance your interviews. You won't learn anything in that whatsoever, but it will enhance your interviews. The next certification I generally recommend for our architects is TOGAF. Why? It's the most common enterprise architecture framework in the world. There's a wide body of knowledge and people respect it. So I get the TOGAF 10 certification. Again, it won't teach you how to be an architect. It'll give you a steps along the way of what to do, but it won't tell you how to do any of those steps. And then I add my personal favorite certification. I think it's the highest value certification in the world right now. It's the CISSP. Why do I pick it? It's not that hard. It's nothing like a CCIE, but it commands almost as much respect as a Cisco certified internet expert. And I can tell you, when I put it on cloud architects and solutions architects and other architects, the world just seems to want to interview them. But no, we had to be able to do the job before we worried about any of the certifications. It's just branding. And then while you're in this certifications and branding phase, you also need to focus on your resume, your LinkedIn profile, because you have to make people come to you. So you're not searching for jobs. Other people are searching for you. And then the last phase for me is actually teaching people how to interview and win the interview, because I've been hired in every interview I've been on, but most people I interview are not hired. So that's the steps. But basically, almost the last thing you ever want to do is certifications. So it's a great question, but I wanted you to know why. The certifications are just there to help you get interviews. You have to be able to do the job first. Good questions. Ashish. Hello, sir. You're currently an AWS cloud engineer, but your company is asking you to build AI skills. Which skills should you develop so you can be future-proof? Well, Ashish, developing AI skills will not make you future-proof. You have to determine what you actually want to do. So here's what I want you to think of in terms of the future skills for the world. And I want you to be very careful about just learning tech stuff. And here's the reason why. 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, AI will code all what we need. Everybody will be a coder. And why do I know it? Not just because the CEOs are saying this at all the biggest tech companies, but look at where the money's going. I mean, seriously, look at where the money's going. Look about how many hundreds of millions or hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested. It's close to $1 trillion in the last year or so of investment that we've seen. So when you've got all the CEOs redirecting all the people to do it, you have to understand that those hands-on engineering skills are pretty much going to be dead, with the exception of the best, the principal engineers. So let's look at the skills that are not replaceable by AI. And let's think about how you can have your career. And then I'll tell you the careers that are always future-proof and why they're future-proof. So first thing I want you to see is the Core Skills 2030 report. Alonzo from my team prettied it up, but this is the identical. This is just exactly as it stands if you read the report itself. And I encourage you to read the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs 2025 report, and it also includes the core skills. Now let's look at the skills of yesterday. Sensory processing things, like those of us that would look at things for defects, people like me that know what to say and which part of the world you go into, but because now AI can help with that. Programming is something that's been dying. You can look at Salesforce. It's replaced 40% of their people with AI. You can look at Google and others that are writing 25% plus code with AI. So you can see where this is dying. You can see that quality control, again, can be scanned. People like me that speak multiple languages, probably not that big of a deal because the phones will be able to translate in real time. Even basic teaching, you can see a lot of those challenges, AI helping some of those things. Now, here's the skills that can't be changed. Analytical thinking. Now, the difference between what we're talking about a technical professional that can be replaced is someone that can code and knows a whole bunch of skills, but not great master of anything. Why? Because AI is better than they are. But an architect, a distinguished engineer that can look at the actual things and understand the impact of one change to the system to another change of the system to be able to understand what possible trade-offs, that is impossible to find. So for this reason, any type of architect role is safe because of desk roles and other things. Now, creative thinking. Machines are not good at creatively solving problems, business problems or technology problems. So your ability to think creatively is human, and this means acting with incomplete information and making decisions without perfect everything. So how do you creatively stop a problem? How do you creatively work around a new regulation? How do you creatively work around a new security threat? Big part of the job. Leadership and influence. So as an architect, obviously we have to creative think every day, but we have to lead a team. We have to influence stakeholders. We have to influence the board. So these jobs can't be replaced. Again, the architect job. But I'll give you some other jobs in a minute that can't be. Systems thinking. This is all like a medical professional. It's understanding if we make one change in the system, what's the impact to the rest of it? How does the entire system work? Again, all human, and it's a job that can't be replaced like the cloud architect job. Talent management. We're leading teams, hiring people. This is here. Curiosity and lifelong learning. You're going to be good to go there. And AI and big data. Obviously, anything that's here. So the cloud architect role, enterprise architect role, security architect role, AI architect role includes 100% of these skills. Guess what else does? The sales engineer, all those same skills. Guess who else does? A global account manager that's selling billion-dollar, several $100 million solutions. Again, has the skills. A VP and SVP, all of that can go. But if it's just engineering skills, you'll have to be in the top 25%, the best of the best. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about someone that can deploy stuff and build stuff. I'm talking about someone that can literally start doing the calculations. Am I going to get 3% more performance out of this or 3% more performance out of here? There's this little bottleneck of the system. How do we tune and optimize that bottleneck without creating another problem in the system? How do we get deep? And those engineers that are deep, we'll still need them. But the hands-on, we don't need. And you know what else we don't need? Someone that knows a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. And here's why. And this is just so important, and I really want you to understand why. So let's draw this out so we can look at something. I want to basically show you here's the reality. So, and this is the biggest threat that we have right now. So we have an expert over here. And experts like me were taught, and because I come from medicine, but experts like me were taught, if you make a mistake, someone could die, you can bankrupt the company. So we are very meticulous, and we typically have the most experience, any expert. Now, AI can't compete to the expert. Experts are so good that they're 95+% right, which in business and statistics is incredible. So we're that good. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So if we're experts are 95% right. Now I want you to really face the reality. And here's the sad reality. That AI, especially AI that's properly trained and great, is about 70% right. There's a reason I'm showing you this. Now, a great engineer is probably 85% right. If he or she was an expert, they would be 95+% right. AI is 70% right. Now, here's the problem. Your bottom 50% of people, bottom 50% is about 60% right. So this is where the problem becomes. This, for many, is not as good as this. This great engineer can't be replaced. This expert architect engineer cannot be replaced because their skills are so good. So why is the average engineer not as good? Because here's what I'll paint the picture of two engineers. So this is a cloud network engineer. And this one can't be replaced. Now this person has a CCIE, which implies some level of expertise. They have experience in network architecture. They have experience in performance tuning networks. So they understand routing. They have expertise in switching. They have understanding wide area networks. They have expertise in SD-WAN, SASE. Oops. Zero trust network access, quality of service. This is the expert cloud engineer. I can't replace this person. And why? This person's 85% right. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. So why is this person 85% right? Because they spent their whole life focused on this. Now let me show you the people that tend to be horrible. And there's a reason. And these are the people that are not as good. And I'm going to show you why. So let's say this is the cloud engineer. And the person decides that they're going to moonlight in DevOps, which is something. They're going to moonlight in operations. Now, they're also going to moonlight in software development. They also want to learn AI. And what happened is you took this person, it could be the same intelligence as this person, and you split their focus across 4 different careers. And instead of being 85% right at one career, they're less than 50% right in all careers. And these are the first people I lay off. And I hate doing layoffs, but these are always the first people that get laid off. Why? They're not good enough at anything to not be replaced by AI. So that's what I encourage you to think about. I don't want you to jump on the bandwagon because it's there and it's exciting. I want you to master whatever it is you love. Look, some jobs can't be replaced. Cloud architect, solutions architect, security architect, AI architect, sales rep, global leaders, global executives, sales engineers, anything that's human to human. Anything that's just engineering can be replaced. So I strongly recommend focusing carefully on the things that can't be replaced or expertise. And I hope that helps. I can also tell you the experts I've hired, I've paid much more over the last 25 years. Balashaki. In my experience, how many people typically make it to the final rounds of an interview process for an architect role? Wow. So statistically speaking, I hear it's upwards of 13%. But about 5,000 people apply. And maybe one person gets the job out of the 5,000. And what's really going on? So the majority of the resumes we get either are engineering resumes. And if I wanted to hire an airplane pilot, I would not hire a dog walker. And the point is, engineers are great. I love engineers. The work they do is super important. But if I have an architect and someone's telling me about the code they wrote, and I don't understand what the business impact is, they're showing me engineering. So there's a lot of that. Now, so most don't actually make it to the interview. Now, when it gets to the interview phase, most don't pass. I've interviewed Folashaki 5,000 people, actually 6,000 people now, but I've hired less than 50 people. I've actually hired less than 25. And here's the reason why. Most of the people I interviewed couldn't explain things on their resume, and you can't hire someone you don't trust. The majority of people did not have the business acumen or the soft skills. And I'll explain what I mean by this. For any architect role, the hiring manager has to ask themselves this question: can I put this candidate in front of the CEO and the board? And if the answer is no, I can't hire them. Can this person give a captivating presentation? If the answer is no, I can't hire them. Can they lead a team? If the answer is no, I can't hire them. When they walk into the room, do they have the presence where I feel them? I want to listen to what they say. If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, I can't hire them. And all that comes long before tech skills. So I almost never have a problem with someone having the tech skills. It's almost exclusively business skills. So typically speaking, I would say in my experience, it's less than 1 or 2%. Now, Folashaki, I speak to my friend David Lithicum all the time. David, I have extraordinary respect for David Lithicum. He's one of the best cloud architects I've ever met. And, you know, I've been an architect for 25 years. He's been an architect for about 35 years. And we're good friends and we're peers. And when I ask him, I say, out of 100 people that you interview, how many can do the job? And he says, usually less than 1. So the key is, why is the people failing the interview? Well, they're failing the interview because they don't know what the job is. They've got the wrong set of skills. And they're just not prepared for the role. The reason is usually, which is why I do so many question and answer sessions, they're prepared for an engineering role. When I walk in there and it's very simple, and I say, tell me about yourself, and the person talks about the code they've written, the things they've done, we say, okay. Now, when that first question on an interview, I say, tell me about yourself. And the person says, well, I've spent about 15 years solving customer problems. I've been able in this time to enhance organizations' performance significantly, either by enhancing their top line revenue, reducing their operating expenses, or make them more efficient by optimizing people, processing, and technology. Now that person looks like someone we want to talk to. So, you know, that's real. I'm really kind of what I really wanted you to think about that. The question is, what percentage of the people made it to the final interview? Almost no one. And why is it? It's the reasons I'm telling you. It's the wrong skills. It's the wrong way of communicating. And that's the reason why. But I'll tell you, it's so hard to hire an architect, and the cloud architect, enterprise architect, and security architect are among the toughest jobs in the world to actually hire for, because it's that hard to hire them. Realistically speaking, if you're great, the interview process will typically get much shorter. And I'll give you an example. The first solutions architect job I had was 3 rounds. Now, the next one was 2 rounds. The one after that, where I joined Cisco, honestly, I met him on, I think it was a Tuesday. And I said, on Thursday, I'm going to Dubai. And I met with him again on a Wednesday, and I had an offer. So that was 2 days. Now, I'll also tell you, Folashaki, that while I was there as a solutions architect, I got an opportunity to work as an enterprise architect. Now, that was a bigger role, and I already worked at Cisco. And for that, I actually had 16 rounds of interviews. Now, I mean, I already worked there and I had 16 rounds of interviews for promotions. And I think I traveled about 30,000 miles just for those interviews, to put it into context. Maybe it was even more than that. So it all depends. So it's going to depend on the company, but it's also going to depend on you. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you walk in and you are so good, the company realizes that you're going to be hired by somebody else and they need to grab you quicker. So they will be more likely to hire. The example I can give you is WorldCom, which was my first tech job. And I interviewed and had an offer that day. Right after WorldCom, I went to a company called Knight Securities. It was the largest market maker on the NASDAQ, and I was hired as a network architect. And I went in and I had an offer that day. Now, I was pretty fresh. I was really solid in architecture in those days. I had answers to every question people could have asked me. Then again, it was Cisco. To get there was a couple of 2 days. Then to move into a senior leadership architect type role, it was 16 interviews. So it really, really depends. Usually speaking, it's about 4 or 5 for most jobs, no Fullashaki. But I wanted to give you the full holistic area so you understood every component of the interview. Hope that made sense and why. Is it conceivable to have a lack of experience in architecture roles and still lead a senior architect role? Well, Wallace Agano was a student of mine. And actually, let's talk about enterprise architects. It is the biggest, most senior of all the roles. 50% of the enterprise architects working at Fullashaki have never worked in tech before. Never. So their enterprise architect was their first architect job ever. And I'll give you examples. Wallace Agano was a sales rep and was hired, for example, as an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase Bank. What's her name? Jennifer was a mental health tech hired by JP Morgan Chase. Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom hired by Microsoft. Yvonne was a 24-year-old waiter hired by AWS as a solutions architect. Jeffrey was a geologist hired by Kayleen as a solutions architect. Lenny was our video editor hired as a solutions architect by Arrow Electronics. So it has nothing to do with your background. It has everything to do with how good you actually are. And the key is, and here's the reason why different people get there kind of quick. Let's look at what we actually do as a cloud architect. And I want to show you why it's not really what you used to do. It's going to be really based upon the actual skills you have right now. And I'll show you why I mean, some people transition earlier than others, but let's talk about why so many people come in from a non-tech background. In order to create a strategic advantage for a company, which is what you ought to do as an architect, you have to know a lot about business. Now, whether you're like me and you got an MBA or you took a course like ours and we're taught business, you have to know business because you can improve a business. CXO relevance and board relevance is the ability to come in and communicate to the C-suite in the language of their choice. Stakeholder management is responsible in any sales role that's meeting with the stakeholders' understanding. Emotional intelligence is critical in any architect role, especially when the client's made mistakes. Negotiation between stakeholders is constant in an architect role. We can't just create a technology plan without creating the cultural change around it and the necessary steps. Change management is a big part of our role. Executive writing is a big part of our role. Sales is a big part of our role. Communicating with executives is a big part of our role. Giving presentations, asking questions, and even influencing others. Now, if you look at this, if you took a high-paid sales rep, they have every one of these skills already. So if we give you the example I'm thinking of, I'll call him A, and A went over to Deloitte as a senior solutions architect as his first tech job ever. He was a sales rep. He already had these skills. So for him, it was just learning these tech skills, which are basically knowing networking, how to set up business continuity and disaster recovery planning, learning about applications and the way they're architected, learning about the types of storage and when to use them and how to tune them, what have you, learning about load balancing, whether it be between clouds or containers or servers or firewalls or GPUs or storage, designing security to protect an organization, understanding your compute infrastructure, whether that's CPUs or GPUs or virtual machines or containers or application virtualization or functions as a service, understanding the types of data and big data, understanding AI and IAM. So I might actually have, let's say I have a software developer They may actually have some experience in this applications world, for example, but they typically don't know anything about any of these or any of these. So that doesn't mean that a developer can't become all of these. I see them do it all the time, but they know one of these domains. Whereas if I actually get a sales rep, they have all of these things. A lot of times I get someone who used to be an executive, and then it's nothing to just teach them this, and then poof, they're in a big role. So anyone can get it. Anyone. But it's how good you are at all the skills, and the majority of the skills are non-technical. Great question there, Fulashaki. Why do some job descriptions mandate proof of concept? Well, I've never seen an accurate job description in my entire life, Fulashaki, and here's the reason why. And I'll tell you what we do to implement a proof of concept for real as an architect versus what people think. Here's how a job description is created in 95% of companies. I decide that I want to hire an architect. So I say, I'm going to hire this architect. Now, you know what happens? After I say I'm going to hire an architect, a job description is written. Now, who do you think is going to write the job description? Not me, not the person hiring them. Someone in HR decided they're going to make up the job description. So it's kind of going to look like this. I say I want to hire somebody. I'm drawing some graphics these days, and Alonzo from my team's been helping. And then HR writes a job description about a job they don't know. Ridiculous. So what is HR? How does HR write a job description about a job they don't know? They Google, and they cut and paste other job descriptions written by HR people that still didn't know. So by the time you see a job description, it is completely irrelevant. I've actually never seen an accurate job description in my entire life. Pretty sad. So let's talk about what we do in a proof of concept. So I've done many proof of concepts. Here's what I do. I scope the proof of concept to see what we have to prove. I determine what all the key performance indicators are that we need to prove as a result of it. I then determine the type of people that are going to go with me on my proof of concept, the skill level of the people that are going to be building out the proof of concept, whatever support structures they will need ahead of time to build out the proof of concept. That's what I do, and that's how I've led every proof of concept for 25 years. So there is that, but you have to understand job descriptions are written by people that don't know. So Fulashaki, I'd ask you this question, and here's the reason why. If I asked you, how would you write a job for a interventional job description for an interventional cardiologist that does electrophysiology studies and radio frequency ablation of parts of the heart, specifically parts of the heart that start a bad rhythm? Could you write that job description? And I hope you realize the answer is no, because you're not an EPS physician. And the key is that's why so many of these job descriptions are so ridiculous, because someone that doesn't know what the job is writing the job description. The HR process has been broken. So you know what I do? You know what I've done? I don't apply for jobs. I go to a recruiter. The recruiter pitches me to the hiring manager. The hiring managers call me. I speak to them. They do an interview. I go back. I interview 1 or 2, 3 times, 4 times. I get an offer long before. And then they say, by the way, we're going to hire you. Now you need to fill out an application. Because I don't want to be dealing with the people that are writing job descriptions about a job that they have no idea what it is. I would go straight to the hiring manager, and that's one of the strategies. But that's what it is. But that's what we really do in a proof of concept. And it's a great question. Your questions today are really great. If you've got some questions, please ask them. We want to do everything we actually can to help you. At what level of seniority does international travel become the norm for the architect? Fulashaki, there's never been a point in my life where I didn't travel internationally. No, to be fair, I didn't spend a lot of time in junior roles. And what I mean by that is my first role was a senior engineer. Within 3 months, I was a lead architect, and I was a principal architect within 2 years. As soon as I reached that, so in my first job, I was at MCI WorldCom in New Jersey. So I didn't have to travel for that job. I was there for about 9 months. When I took my first job at Night Security, when they were the largest market maker on the NASDAQ, I did travel for them, and I had to travel fairly extensively. Not that much, but I did travel. Then I went to Riverstone Networks after that. It was the old Cabletron. And that's where travel became, I couldn't even imagine the kind of travel. And you know what? It was a really great experience. I was young. We didn't have video conferencing like we did today. So my day might have been go from Princeton, New Jersey, go to San Jose one day. The next day it was Mike, go to London. The next day it was 2 days later, it was, could you go to Dubai? I'd be in Dubai. I'd then take a trip to Australia. I'd leave Australia, go to Hong Kong. I'd stop in Dubai for another reason. I used to stop in Dubai for a lot. It was a really great place. And then I'd stop in continental Europe and be back to the US. And that was my life for years. And I'll tell you when it got better. Right around 2006 and 2007, Cisco came up with this ultra high definition telepresence. And there were these conference rooms where every conference room in the entire world was set up identical. And the rooms had these better than HD TVs that we had actually designed. Every room looked the same. Every table looked the same. And you couldn't even tell psychologically that you weren't even in the same room. The screens were so big that the humans were life size. And that took my travel from about 250,000 miles a year to like 30 or 40,000. But at that point, I was pretty senior in my career. We've now reached a world where so much is done remotely that you don't have to travel that bad. But here's where you do want to travel when possible. You definitely want to travel to the interview for a cloud architect or a solutions architect interview if you have the opportunity, because they'll appreciate that you came in and you'll make a bigger impact in person than you would on video. I definitely, anytime I'm going to kick off a big project and need to meet with the executive sponsors, I definitely try to go in person. Makes an impact, really look that person in the eye. I typically do that. When I need to kick off a team building event, I go in person. If there's any complexity along the way, I go in person. But I'm not traveling like I used to, and none of us really are. But as soon as you have something meaningful to offer, there's only a short number. So Falashaki, I want you to look at it this way. Imagine a world where, let's say we need 1 million cloud architects and we can hire 100,000 of them, and we still need 900,000. It's worse than that. We can't hire any. So when you can't hire anybody, if you got someone good, if they live in Palm Beach, Florida, send them to New York. And after they leave New York, send them to Denver. And after they leave Denver, send them somewhere. But thankfully, we have video conferencing for the most part, and it's not what it used to be. But the travel is fun. Travel as an architect, you typically have a good budget. You typically eat good food, drink good wine, or whatever you like. It's not usually painful travel. But it definitely is a world where you typically travel if you want to be in there. Now, when could you not travel? You could actually work as a solutions architect or a cloud architect for a business that's not global, where maybe they're only in the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut metro, which there's plenty of those. So, you could do those jobs where you're not traveling, or you could just take a job like I do, where you just consult to the largest organizations in the world, and then you're going to travel. But you can be good and senior at either level. Great question. If anybody's got questions, please bring them in. And if you've got more, please ask them. John Franklin. Hi, Mike. Do I recommend TOGAF and CISSP cert for all architects, regardless whether an AI architect or security architect or whatever? No. So the reason I recommend TOGAF for cloud architects and enterprise architects is as follows. Most people have gotten horrible results from their cloud spending. Horrible. Depending upon the study, between 70 and 90+% of the businesses that invested in cloud computing got nothing for it. Their expenses went up, they had no business value, and they've had more security events. So all in all, there's a lot that cloud computing can offer, but we need people that can actually understand the business. So I like TOGAF because it gets interviews. I like the CISSP because it gets interviews, but I wouldn't get an AI architect and give them a CISSP. So why do I do things differently? Let's kind of play with it. Let me kind of whiteboard it out, John, and show you what we might be trying to do for different kinds of jobs. So let's look at this. So let's say I have a network. Let's say I have a security architect. What are they doing, realistically speaking? Well, let me break down the security architect skills real quick. So every architect, for the most part, needs the same tech skills. But if we look at the security architect, look what they're focusing on. data security, network security, security frameworks, risk management, security policy, application security, security governance, identity and access management, and zero trust, all kinds of encryptions, business continuity and disaster recovery planning, incident response planning, security operations, physical security, everything. So this person's life is 100% focused on security. So this person, because they're focused on security, needs a security expert portfolio. So what would this be for the security architect? You know, you might actually do something that looks like this. You might do a CISSP as a base. I view the CISSP as my intro to security, just like my CCIE was my intro to networking. And then I view that if you have here, the CCSP is a quite good one. And what's good about the CCSP? It honestly talks about all the cloud risks that are real that everybody refuses to talk about. So that's pretty important. And these two show knowledge in security and knowledge in cloud security. Now, I usually do this one too for a security architect, and I'll tell you why, the CISM. And I like these three because they look good. The executive teams knows what they are, and it looks good, but it's also this. So this is my intro to security. Well, after we teach them the skills, obviously, because you're not going to know enough in these certifications to be a security architect. But this kind of reinforces basic security. This reinforces the cloud challenges, and the CISM is typically what the CISO might be taking. So this is going to convince you what your senior leadership is thinking. So that's why that's a good set of security architect. Now I'm going to build one for a network architect, and then just kind of show you, and then I'm going to show you why we get different on some of these others. So if it's a network one, I'm going to, ideally in a perfect world, I'm going to have a CCDE or a CCIE, at least one of them. And maybe for the cloud, I know it's so intro level, but maybe we have an AWS advanced networking. I mean, it's very intro level, but not everybody knows that. So maybe we have that. And that might actually be it. Actually, maybe we have an aviatrix network professional. Why? So what we get out of this is we know we've got some energy, enthusiasm, passion, competency coming from the CCIE. We know the person's got some knowledge on how to do some overlays and multi-cloud stuff from aviatrix. And AWS is your more common one. So this shows familiarity with what AWS calls their networking stuff. So that's good. Now, how do we get into a world of, let's go back to this enterprise architect, cloud architect skills, where it's mostly business, and then you've got a little of everything. It's at such a generalist level, you'll never be good enough. You'll never be deep enough at anything. You're going to always need a team. So what do we do here? Well, because there's not really anything good. So if we start thinking of what we actually do as architects and what the architect flow actually looks like, and it looks like this for the most part in every architecture, where we meet with a whole bunch of executive sponsors. We figure what's in scope, what we're trying to do. Then we meet with the business people, figure out what the business actually looks like, the org chart, the value streams, key business processes, what have you. Then we start looking at this technology, data, whatever. And then we start migration planning and governance. Yeah, there's really nothing that's going to cover that. So what we do with cloud and enterprise architects is create the illusion of something, because why is it? We're going to train the person first to the job. So for a cloud architect one or an enterprise architect one, we're really just trying to pick things that are going to make you look smart. And what do I mean by that? So if this is a cloud architect, why would I do this? I often do this for an enterprise architect as well. If I do the CISSP, here's what I get out of it. This gets people a lot of interviews. Why? Because this has a lot of executive concept in it. It is not an engineering exam. They give you a situation and make you pick of all the options. So that's a lot like an architect thinks or a business strategist. So people tend to like this. This certification gets a lot of value. Now, If I show TOGAF 10, that shows me something very good. And let's show you what I mean by this. So TOGAF 10 teaches me exactly how to work through the steps of the architecture. Doesn't tell me to do the steps, what the steps should be. Why do I want those? Well, here's what the AWS well-architected framework is. It makes the same recommendations for 100% of everybody. So the AWS well-architected framework is the equivalent of a physician who prescribes the same pill to everybody in the entire world, regardless of what their medical condition is, because he followed a framework or she followed a framework, and in that they all get the same treatment. Now, nobody's getting any competitive advantage for this, and I'm not saying there's not places to use the well-architected framework, but what companies don't want is the same cookie-cutter design that every business has in the entire world. So they do want a customized approach. And, Zachman can do it, TOGAF can do it, but whatever. So companies do like to see that you're not brainwashed, if you will, by the companies that are trying to sell you stuff. Vendor neutral, not trying to sell you stuff. Vendor neutral, not trying to sell you stuff. Now, at that point, we need something, right, to show cloud computing. We've got nothing out there that's really there on cloud computing. Truthfully, the CompTIA has a cloud certification that's probably better, but it doesn't hold any value, and it's not going to get you interviews. But it's probably a better certification than all of them. But, here, if we put an AWS SAP or a Google Professional Cloud Architect, look what it looks like. Now we've got someone that knows something, or at least the illusion is they know something about architecture. They understand AWS. They understand security. This looks good. So it's about building the illusion with the certifications. The ability of getting the job, again, goes back to the process I always talk about of first being able to do the job, then being what the hiring manager wants, then having a real world portfolio. And this stuff always comes in last. So certifications are just about, can we get you something? For AI, there's not a lot of good stuff. There's an AI cloud practitioner from AWS, but that's basically a vocabulary exam. So there's not a lot to it. Good questions. Love these questions. Keep asking them. Chris, we can bring in the next one. I have a PMP. How does that help you in your journey to become an architect? Tony, it doesn't. The journey to become an architect is learning how to be an architect. A certification is just a certification. Now, Tony, if you've worked as a program manager, and during your time as a program manager, you've had to communicate to the C-suite, you've had to give presentations all the time, you've had to influence the C-suite on the board, you've had to create an actual team, determine the capabilities of the people on the team, create MOUs, for example, help teams respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, trained and developed the staff. If you've done that as a program manager, you're going to have a lot of the skills that you need to learn. But a certification is just a certification, and certifications will get nobody any job ever. In fact, I think the biggest scam in technology was telling people to get certified. In medicine, in other environments, here's what we do. We train you for the job, and then after you get certified. I train you to be a pilot, and then ultimately you have a license after you can fly the plane. I mean, seriously, think about it. You have to learn how to drive a car before you get a driver's license event, so you don't hurt people on the road. Now, in this particular case, people go get a certification and expect to tie that certification to an actual job. And the answer is you can't. So, Tony, if you have some skills already, let me know. Are you used to selling? Have you given large numbers of presentations? Have you had to manage a fair number of stakeholders? Because a lot of program managers do. Have you had to build an adoption plan? Have you had to sign and create MOUs, RFI, RFP responses? Those things will actually help you, but you can't take a certification and ask it to just help you. Certifications are branding. Skills are what get you hired. Now, I'm not saying, so the key is actually, why don't you come tonight and join us in the How to Become an Architect webinar? And I'll go over every step you need to weigh. to learn. And also, Tony, what I'll do on that webinar, if you'd like, I'll give you a little mini interview. I could assess what skills you have now versus what skills you actually need to learn. And I will do anything I can to guide you. But certifications don't equal any job. They don't necessarily equal job preparedness. They might not. The CCIE generally tells people that the people have the skills to do a network engineering job. I'll interview them, and if they can, I'll hire them, and if they can't, I won't. But these other kind of certifications, they're not that. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But come tonight, I'd love to actually ask you questions, figure out, what you want to do, be able to assess what your actual skills are. And then after that, I'll definitely be able to make some great recommendations. How you hear enterprise architect roles are often filled internally rather than externally. I've never heard that in the last 25 years, but okay. How true is that? It's not true. I've never heard of anything like it in my entire life. Is it true that the demand is less for enterprise architects than others? Not necessarily. So, John, the problem is, what is an enterprise architect? And there's so many enterprise architects working in a company, and we all go by crazy different labels. So that's where the problem becomes. And I'll show you what I mean. Let me show you an IT organization that has 3 sets of enterprise architects. So if we go here, this is a typical IT organization. So we have a chief information officer that is an executive. Ultimately, they are, to a degree, a business architect and an enterprise architect. We have the chief architect in these companies who is an enterprise architect. So he or she will be the chief architect, and that's an enterprise architect. We have a chief technology officer, to a degree, is also an enterprise architect, and then we actually have the enterprise architects on the team. So there is huge demand for these roles. Now, obviously, these are bigger roles than these. So there'll be more options for the junior level solutions architect, because that's an intro level. Well, then there will obviously be for these $500,000, $800,000 plus chief architect roles. But there are plenty of these jobs. Plenty. And I'll tell you, they're a great job. They're actually considered the hardest job to find. And because of that, there's lots of opportunities here. Great questions today. Keep asking them. Sandy, hi, Mike. Good to see you. Good to see you as well. How is AI affecting architect roles right now? It's creating a whole lot more of them. And the reason is, and I'll go, is anytime we have a new vehicle or a new tool to improve business performance, it's a job for an architect. So if you may notice, Sandy, and I know you for a while, if you have the Sandy, I think you are. Many years ago, we had a cloud engineering program, and I stopped selling it, and I told everybody to get out of engineering roles and to move in one of the following roles: cloud architect, AI architect, security architect, solutions architect, sales roles, sales engineers, or senior leadership roles. Why is that? Because AI is the coolest new tool in the world for us strategists to help business be more competitive. Are we using it to help an airline to better purchase their fuel option costs, to have lower fuel costs? Are we using it to create an AI recommendation engine to keep people on a global e-tailer or retailer's website longer so they spend more money? Are we using it to replace back-end staff to enhance operational efficiency so we can rededicate that staff to doing something more strategic? So big, great things have happened to architects as a result of any new technology. So what are candidates doing that is giving them an edge? The key is having the right skills. And what I mean by that is, so where could you realistically be? You either end up in the future on the sales side, and Sammy, if you're who I think you are, I know you've got some really good skills there, and I might want to capitalize on them. They're going into the enterprise architecture or the AI architecture side. And what's different? And how do you have an edge, Sandy? It is impossible to hire an architect. Why? It is impossible to hire an architect because the people that actually like the technology typically don't want to learn the other things that are responsible for an architect. And if we look at this, where are we really dealing with? This is the majority of the job. And if we look at if we really look at this, if we use AI and we don't optimize the key processes that we're dealing with, we'll get nothing out of it. So business process optimization is critical here. And those people that have expertise here have zero problems ever getting hired. Now, one of the biggest things for an architect is the ability to exercise influence, to get the board and the C-suite to see it your way, to keep your architecture team working. So the architects that I can never hire enough of are the people that have excellent skills. Now, architecture is only about as good as your information. So is medicine, so is psychology, so is psychiatric work. So your ability to get information and ask the right questions and get people to like you is critical. Have these skills, you have a job always. Now, in this role, we give a lot of presentations because the presentation is designed to sway someone. So presentation skills are great. Now, if you can communicate to the executives and you have the executive and board level presence, you almost always have a job, and it pays much, much more. If you can sell and convince people to spend $1 billion on their AI versus $500 million on their AI, there's much more money in your career and competitiveness. Your ability to walk in and optimize a business, to create some strategy and manage those people, this is your biggest skill. So if I've got an architect that's big on tech skills and light on these, that might be a $180,000 job. I've got someone that's an expert on these that still has this, that might be an $800,000 job. This is the competitive advantage, not this. The people that spend their time on this tend to get the intro solutions architect jobs. The people that focus on this get the chief information officer, the CTO, the chief enterprise architect roles, the big roles. So it tends to be, where do you choose to be? But, obviously there's a focus on these skills, and this is obviously critical in addition to this. But that's really where you're at. And they would be focusing on things to make AI better, meaning things like data hygiene, data security, governance, obviously for us is a big thing. Understanding big data, how we deal with it. Database is huge for the AI architect. Understanding the kind of ethics, what kind of models we build or tune or test or train, what have you, the kind of inference engines. That's the AI world, but the biggest opportunity is here. That's usually your biggest spot. Great questions. Do Microsoft exams make sense for an architect? It depends what kind of architect. So realistically speaking, if I wanted to be a cloud architect, I might do the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. I really would. And why? It all fits into my little certification, branding, try to make something. So if we go back to this one I previously described for a cloud architect, and I said, pick the cloud provider certification of your choice because it really doesn't matter. What I might actually do here is I might actually swap the AWS AP with an Azure Solutions Architect Expert. Nice intro level exam. It's not that hard, but it'll definitely teach you the AWS solutions or the Azure terms. So I'm good with that. But remember, the certifications aren't going to teach you the job, but it will get you interviews. So yes, that Microsoft certification is great. But don't do sysops type stuff, engineering type stuff, Windows type stuff. That's not going to help you as an architect. But that one in particular, it can help you get interviews. And as long as you're trained to be an architect, you'll be good to go. How is an enterprise architect different than a business architect? Curious George, I love this question. So let's kind of really work on what we're dealing with as an enterprise architect. And I'll actually work on it as a business architect. And I've been both. Let's draw a new slide here. Let's have some fun with it. Sharing the wrong one. Let's work on this one. So let's say over here, these are the main elements of business, or at least they used to be. They're the people that do the job, how the people do their job, and the tech stuff that supports them. This has been for the last few years. And as an enterprise architect or business architect, we focus on these things, both. So what are we really talking about? We're making sure that we have the right people. The people have the right skills. in order to do the jobs we actually need. If the people have the wrong skills, they have to be cross-trained or they have to be replaced with people that have the right skills. So from any enterprise architect perspective, from any business architect perspective, we're all focusing on this. The processes. How does the company get stuff done? So let's say we have 2 sales reps. And sales rep 1, we have sales rep 2. For whatever reason, sales rep 1 needs 20 visits to sell a product. And by after the 20 visits, sells something that's worth $5 million. And then we've got sales rep 2 that has the exact same training, the same exact kind of customer that averages 10 visits. And at the end of the 10 visits, she gets $10 million in sales. So we clearly have someone that's 4 times more efficient here, half the work to double the sales. So what we would do in a company is we would study how sales rep 2 does her job, and we try to figure out that process and get everybody else to follow it. So that's really process optimization. And it used to just be technology. This is the data center, the cloud stuff, the applications, all of it that supports this, the robotics, what have you. So, and I'm going to show you where the world's changing. So the enterprise architect is here. And I would say 20% of his people. I would say 20%, I would say 30% is process. And then the other 50% is technology. That's the enterprise architect. Now, if we look at the business architect, because they're all focusing on the same thing, we've got the business architect that's probably 30% focused, or 30 to 40% focused on the people, probably 40% focused, or even 50% focused on the processes, and then realistically maybe 20% focused on the technology. So let me change this. So it's really the same thing. And as it turns out, as you get more of expertise here, you tend to move into bigger roles. Again, they become chief architect roles that look much more like business architect roles. The CEO, business architect. The CFO, business architect. CTO, business architect. CIO, business architect. So that's kind of your difference. It's truly just where the focus is. But I also want you to look at one more thing. So the model may actually be changing a little bit. So if enterprise architecture was always people, processes, and technology, and the technology was the servers, the storage, what have you, we're not necessarily in that same world. We now have AI agents that are acting as people. So we might actually be in a world where we may have to tune some of these models to people, processes, technologies, and agents. But, we'll get to see. I'm not sure what happened over here. Oh, something moved around, but that's typically what we're talking about. Great questions. Vladdy 411. Is it possible to work for the federal government as a cloud architect consultant for another organization? Meaning you work for yourself as a consultant to the client, or you work for a company that's a consultant to the government. That's totally fine. I mean, lots of times I've worked for companies that consulted to foreign governments. I've consulted to many governments throughout the world on their healthcare systems, for example. So, there is that, but I don't exactly know what you mean. I mean, what you wouldn't do necessarily is work for the federal government and necessarily work for someone else. In some cases you could, and in some cases you couldn't. It would all depend on the sensitivity of what you're doing, what kind of non-disclosure agreements you were given by the company, etc. So, for example, I might not legally be able to work on Cisco and Juniper at the same time as a counts, because there's a competitor there. And I would be in breach of ethics if I accidentally got the information from one to the other as an architect. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with you consulting to the US government on one thing and consulting to another company on something completely different. But you couldn't be consulting to the US government and learn a secret and then work for an enemy government or an enemy something else along the way, or a business that's incompetitive. So it's all based upon the sensitivity of the information that you'll be working with, the kind of job you'll actually be doing in your job, and the organizations that you might need to have like a firewall in between them, so to speak. But great question. If you give me more information on what you mean, I can absolutely add more. And my governance is crucial for architecture. But governance itself is a very deep topic. How deep should an architect dig into this world? What level of depth? Andy, it's going to depend on where you're actually working and how far you are in your career. In the beginning of your career, you're a solutions architect. That's a pretty entry-level role. I start a lot of people in that role. In that role, you're dealing with probably 40% tech. And you're not getting very deep into governance at all. By comparison, you're an enterprise architect. Half of your job might be governance. 3/4 of your job might be governance, depending upon the company. So it's about understanding the actual needs of your role. And let's actually talk about, let's bring that into something else. So best way I can describe this is the way athletes are trained. So, and this is the difference between a personal trainer that counts your reps in a gym and a strength and conditioning coach that trains a pro football player or a hockey player or an Olympic gymnast. So when you're dealing with that, let's say a mixed martial artist, the first thing you have to understand is what are the demands of their sport? What energy systems are used, for example, phosphagen, lactate, what have you. Then you have to determine how long is the sport? How much stamina are they going to need? How much strength is needed for the sport? How much power is needed for the sport? What level of agility and movement? And then you build your training plan based upon that. So that's the same as any architecture. What are we trying to achieve and what are all those things? Now, as we get into bigger companies, Andy, governance becomes much more impossible. Working with a company that's got 500,000 people needs incredible governance to make it actually work. Many layers, potential processes, change control, huge. At the same time, a smaller, more nimble business might not need it. And there are businesses that don't have a lot of people that still generate an enormous amount of money. I think Klarna was an example of one of them. Lots of tech, small number of people generating an incredible amount of money. Now, in a business like that, it's finance, right? So they would need less governance as a small company, but they're in the financial industry. Now, financial industry is highly regulated. Highly regulated things need to make sure you adhere to regulations, which means you need a lot of governance, lots of lawyers, lots of this, lots of this, lots of this. A hospital, lots of governance, lawyers, experts, what have you. And then there's some organizations that themselves aren't really any big deal. And those things themselves are nothing to worry about, smaller governance, but it depends on the job. But for the kind of jobs I work on or David Lithicum works on, it is hugely, hugely, hugely important. For the solutions architect job, not that much. So it kind of depends where you want to be and where you're at. But I would definitely, Andy, as I was progressing my career, I would definitely really get deep into governance, learn organizational strategy, organizational change, and all that stuff. Assuming they have the required skills, does speaking multiple languages increase the chances of getting hired? Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I mean by that is, if you speak the native language of people, you increase the number of people you can work with, and you increase the rapport that you have. For example, when I go home to Greece, and I have an accent, my Greek is not perfect. I live in America. But when I go to Greece, I communicate in Greek. And when I walk into a hotel and they see me dressed as an American and they hear an American accent and I speak to them in Greek, it's immediately, oh, welcome, 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 welcome. You turn the time to learn. And, I spent time, and I don't speak Spanish the way I used to, but I used to work in Latin America. When I was younger, I actually did speak a fair amount of Spanish, and I tried to speak in Spanish, and it enhanced my opportunities dramatically. Did a lot of work in Central and South America. So multiple languages, yeah, definitely is a help. Anytime you can better communicate with people, you're better as an architect. Anytime you can increase the number of people you can communicate in, you're better as an architect. I wish I spoke more languages. I speak 2, almost 3, but I wish I spoke more. I wish I spoke Arabic for real. I wish I spoke French. I wish I spoke Italian. I wish I spoke Portuguese and full Spanish. I really wish I did. I'd love to speak more languages. I would. More people I can talk to, more people I can make friends with, and more people to do business with as well. All wonderful, wonderful things. But I do. I like to speak multiple languages, and I think it's a great thing. Is ITL knowledge relevant to enterprise architecture? It's not going to hurt you. So, where we get bogged down is, how much of this academic stuff is really what we need versus how much of practical architecture and practical transformation matters. I'm more of a pragmatic person. How do we get there? Now, should we use a structured approach? A standardized system each time? Probably. Do I believe in a structured approach? Yes, but I believe in a structured approach with a lot of tuning. If that makes sense. So I've got my plan, and then the reality is I adapt my plan when I get there. That's more of exactly what I need. So is ITL or not? It's not going to hurt you. I would focus on more business acumen. I would focus on more executive presence. I would focus on more leadership. I would focus on better strategy. Because at the end of the day, where can you actually have a bigger impact? In an IT process, or by creating a new strategic blueprint for the organization? And this question, Andy, is such a good question. Because when you look at what we can do as architects, physicians, attorneys, any of these 3 kind of roles where we do the same job, even strategy consultants, business architects, the better our ability to understand business, the better ability for us to understand business strategy, the better our ability to be as good as the CEO of these businesses are, determines what kind of advice we can guide someone. And at the end of the day, there's there. Now, Andy, let me tell you about the actual architecture that changed my life. I was working as a principal architect already. I've been working on big projects. In my youth, I was focused more on the tech. I was some tech guru that was brought in for IP multicast. Oh, that's great, right? And I'll tell you, as I ultimately learned more strategy and more business, I just played at a different level. When somebody else was talking about some network switches or something like that, I was talking about how the enhanced connectivity could enable the internet service providers to offer new things, which enabled them to enhance their revenue, cut their expenses, and the conversations I had changed my career there. In fact, it was this particular one. It was a global bank. And I can remember this architecture. It was going back to about 2003. I'd been a principal architect, and I was told that I needed to create a contact center of the future for this global bank. And I was like, Mike, you're the lead architect. Now, Andy, what was the one thing I didn't know anything about? Was contact centers in my entire life. I knew nothing of voice. I mean, absolutely zero. I knew video. I knew IP multicast. I knew how to set up and strategize with VPLS and MPLS and intermediate systems to intermediate systems and LSPF. I was a network expert, and all of a sudden I'm in a voice thing, and I have no idea. Andy, that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, and I didn't know it. So because I had this big architecture and I had no idea where to even start, I said to my manager, how big of an architecture team can I make? And my manager said, it's Cisco. This is a huge deal. Build whatever team you need. And I went, okay. So I started looking out there and said, who are the distinguished engineers that can get to the meat of what things that I don't know? Who are the sales specialists and architects in these areas that I don't know? Can you work with me? So I took that team, responded to an RFP that came in at 250 pages. The response was close to 1,000 pages. I led that architecture team through proof of concepts throughout the entire process. And ultimately, I was on stage. I remember me as meeting John Chambers on stage, won awards for the most strategic deal in Cisco, one of the hardest wins in Cisco. And all of it built my career because I didn't actually know the tech. So I actually built the team. I led that team. And it was interesting. I remember when we were doing the proof of concept, one of the VPs came on site to check and see what was going on. And one of the senior directors of engineering came as well. And I said, I'm taking the staff to lunch. Can you come in and visit? You want to join us? And they came. And they came back and they said, Mike, I didn't realize you had that kind of leadership skills. I didn't realize you were that kind of executive. Big things are coming from you. All because I ended up on a project where I didn't know the tech and I had to strategize and be a leader. Hope that helps. Business, business, business. Great question, Andy. Is it a palatable practice to make as much of a cloud architecture as vendor neutral as possible, accounting for the portability of cross-cloud scalability? Okay, so let's talk about what we ultimately do. And I'll walk you through the process of going from one architecture to another, because your questions today are really rock solid. So let's say we start here. We're not going to have to go to all of it right now. I'm just going to basically go to a few things. So we've already done the business executive stuff, right? We've already figured out what we're dealing with in the future. We've already figured out data, what have you. So now we have to go from the technology architecture to the solutions architecture. So let me show you what I mean. We'll do one of these in real time to kind of map it out for you. Now, when I'm speaking to the client, the discussion is going to be this. Let's say if they've got a website. So I'm going to have AWS over here. I'll show you the difference between a cloud architecture versus the solutions architecture. Now we might actually have here, let's just say that we've got our internet source, and I'll draw the DMZ externally, but we've got a load balancer. Behind the load balancer, we've got some virtual machines. Virtual machines are attached to block storage, what have you. Just didn't mean to do this. This is just a quick little demo. So let's say we've got this, and let's say this is, at our architecture level, we might have something that looks like this. We might have DNS that's going to send 50% of the traffic here and 50% of the traffic here. And that's our generic cloud architecture level. And maybe we've got some security that looks something like this on the way in. Maybe we've got a CDN out here, and then I'll show you how we would change it to the solutions architecture. So maybe we've got a CDN here on the way into our web servers. Maybe we've got a network load balancer. Maybe behind that, because let's say it's a very high security environment. Let's say we have a Palo Alto next generation firewall VM. Actually, just say, we're just not going to say any firewall right now. And then we'll have another one of these layers and a separate set of firewalls from another company. Then maybe over here we've got another set of load balancers and some we'll fix it in a second. We'll turn this into solutions architectures. And then we've got a load balancer, for example, and we've got WAF on a load balancer. Some kind of a WAF. And then we've got our VMs. So this is a basic architecture for the demilitarized zone, and then we've got a basic cloud architecture piece. So how do we go from this to the solutions architecture? So this is the cloud architecture. Now let's turn this into the solutions architecture. So the DNS over here, whose DNS are we going to use? We have to use a DNS that's going to work in both clouds. So let's say the DNS is F5. And maybe this is an internet gateway called on AWS and somebody else's version. So because it's on AWS, they call it an elastic load balancer. AWS calls their virtual machines EC2, and then their block storage gets changed to EBS. Now, by the same time, it's Azure. I forget. So Azure calls it an Azure load balancer. They don't need an internet gateway because they automatically have a default route to the internet. They have their Azure virtual machine, and then they have their managed disk. What they call it, managed disks, I think. So, I mean, that's taking it to the solutions architecture from the actual technology architecture. It's just putting in your vendor's products. We can do it for the security thing too. We'll go back to our demilitarized zone, and let's say that this was if it was on AWS, we'd call it CloudFront if we chose to use theirs. and we'll call it an elastic load balancer instead. Now this might be a Palo Alto virtual machine for the first set of firewalls. Then we've got another load balancer, and then this could be a Cisco firewall virtual machine. I'm drawing a blank on an IDS IPF. This could be AWS WAF here. So that's and this, of course, your virtual machines would be changed to EC2. And that's how we realistically go in any environment, from the actual architecture to the actual solutions architecture. So I kind of hope that kind of pieced those two things together for you. Great questions today. What is the recommended time horizon that architects should account for with their proposed designs? It depends on the scope of the architecture. Large scope architectures that I've worked on have taken a team of 50 people at least 12 months to even figure out what's going on and come up with a design. I've also worked on things that we could do in a week. So it's going to be based upon what's in scope, the level of complexity that you have to deal with. How does ARP know anything? What does it know? Is ARP the only legal meaning of the internet? So how does ARP use that first information to know more? So not that it's a career thing, but let's have a little fun with it. I don't mind. I'm always happy to get a little geeky with some networking things. So let's look at something like this. I'll draw it out. So let's say you've got your PC over here. You've got your route. You've got a router over here that you're plugged into. This is, say, your default gateway. And then you've got a second router. And then you've got another PC over here. So obviously the PC and the router have to be on the same subnet. The other PC and the router have to be on the same subnet. And obviously there's the link. This subnet has to be different than this one and this one. So now the PC says, I want to connect to the network. I want to connect to this server. So the PC, first thing it does is it does an ARP. ARP, who has the MAC address? And the ARP is an F broadcast that goes out to everybody. Who has the MAC address for this PC? Now this router over here has a route in its routing table, but does not know the MAC address of this PC. So when this PC says, who has the MAC address of the PC, the router says, yes, I own the MAC address. And because it doesn't, it's called the proxy ARP. Now that router will then look in its routing table and say, do I have a path to this PC? And it does. It'll notice that it sends it on this outgoing interface. So again, if it's an Ethernet interface, it will say, what is the MAC address of this PC? This router will actually answer. Now, when the packet actually gets to this and the router looks in its routing table, do I actually have an IP address for this host? It's going to see that it's directly connected, and it's going to say ARP, who has the MAC address of this PC, and then the PC will respond. So it typically, there's an ARP who has, and then there's an actual response. That's typically how this works. Fun question. What finance or business topics an aspiring business architect or enterprise architect would focus on? Everything. So, and what do I mean by everything? If you're going to enhance a business, and that's your job, you're a strategy consultant to optimize the business, you have to know everything about a business. Which is why I say, if you're not with us, because we train all the things you need to know about a business, go get a master's in business. So that means you need to understand what impacts revenue. You need to understand a balance sheet. You need to understand a financial statement. You need to understand routes to revenue. You need to understand when companies can recognize or impact revenue. You need to understand what impacts cost of goods sold and what you could do, what impacts EBITDA, what impacts net income, and where you can do things along the way to improve and optimize. You need to know what goes into a sales cycle. You need to know how a company could charge for its products, how a company could offer its project. What you really need to be able to do is walk into a business, excuse me, as if you were consulting to the CEO and advise that CEO how to do a better business. So think about this. Let's say you're walking into the woman, what was it, Spanx? It's a multi-billion-dollar company a woman started. So you're going to walk into this business and you want to advise that person on how to grow the Spanx brand. You better understand business. You better understand the Spranks brand. You better understand the consumers. You better understand how they sell it, how they reach their clients, and everything so you can guide them. So pretty much everything necessary to understand a business. Is because if you're going to be an advisor to CEO, you have to know how to run a business as good as a CEO. So this is an extremely good question. I just hope I answered in a manner that makes sense. And I really invite you to the webinar tonight. I think it'll be fun. We'll get real geeky on how to become an architect, like a cloud architect. And if it's enterprise architect stuff, we can have a conversation too. Andy Stover, is business acumen, instead of saying BGP is a path vector routing protocol, BGP will allow your companies to connect with third parties and leverage their services to enhance your business? Probably half of the way. So Andy, I would say BGP is a routing protocol that enables us to connect to external organizations. By connecting to external organizations, we can control what we can do business with them, potentially having new customers, new supply chain partners. One of the other things that BGP does is it enables us to connect in a somewhat secure manner, determine who we're going to communicate with and what we're going to communicate with. So BGP offers us the ability to do new business, but also control who we do business with. I think I would probably go that way. Because BGP does have that optimization of you can control who sees the message. So why do we use BGP? Because it's scalable and it's tunable. So yeah, but you're halfway there. So these were all such great questions. Now tonight, we have a webinar on how to become a cloud architect. It's live on Zoom. I love meeting people. You can turn on your camera if you want. We can have face-to-face conversations. You can ask me questions. You're not getting hired on interviews. You want to know why? I'll interview you and assess you and tell you why. Not getting calls for interviews. I can look at your LinkedIn profile and I'll help you to guide you. Anything we can do on this free webinar to help you become a cloud architect. And if you want to ask about other architect careers like enterprise architect, security architect, ask me. We'll do anything we can to help you. And it's free and it's live and it's fun. It's on Zoom. So I hope to join me there. We have a 50% off sale off of all of our architecture programs for another day and a half. So take advantage of it while it goes away. It ends on the 30th. So right before the month ends. So please take advantage of that. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your cloud architect, enterprise architect, security architect, AI architect, or any other architect career.